In the late 9th century, England was on the brink of disaster. Viking invaders, ruthless and unstoppable, swept across the land, burning towns and slaughtering its people. Northumbria, East Anglia, and much of Mercia had fallen, and it seemed that all of England would soon be under Viking control. But in the midst of this chaos, one kingdom stood firm: Wessex. In this chaotic situation, one man would rise to change the course of history. His name was Alfred the Great. Against overwhelming odds, Alfred defended his kingdom from the Viking onslaught and also laid the foundations for a united England. Before we talk about Alfred, let's understand the world he was born into. In the 9th century, a relentless tide swept across the shores of England. It wasn't the sea, but something far more dangerous: the Vikings. Ruthless seafarers from Scandinavia, they brought war, terror, and destruction to the Anglo-Saxon kingdoms. These warriors, armed with axes and shields, arrived not just to raid, but to conquer. England, fractured into smaller kingdoms, was vulnerable, and the Vikings knew it. In 865, a massive Viking force known as the Great Heathen Army landed in East Anglia. This was no ordinary raid. It was a full-scale invasion. The Vikings, led by legendary warriors like Ivar the Boneless, Halfdan Ragnarsson, and Ubba, swept across the Anglo-Saxon kingdoms. Over the next several years, they systematically destroyed the great Anglo-Saxon kingdoms. Northumbria fell. East Anglia was next. Mercia crumbled under the Viking onslaught. Kingdom after kingdom was shattered, leaving Wessex as the last line of defense. Alfred's predecessors, King Egbert, managed to hold the line against Viking raids, but the threat loomed larger with each passing year. Egbert's son, Ethelwulf, fought several battles to defend Wessex. He even struck peace with some Viking forces, buying time but not security. But the peace was always temporary, as the Vikings were relentless, and it was only a matter of time before Wessex would be drawn into a full-scale war for survival. Alfred, born in 849, was the youngest son of King Ethelwulf of Wessex. As a child, Alfred witnessed his family's constant struggles against the Viking threat. He wasn't expected to become king, but destiny would soon place the fate of Wessex in his hands. In 871, the Viking threat reached its peak in Wessex. Alfred's older brother, King Aethelred, took up arms against the invaders. The Vikings advanced with brutal efficiency, and Wessex was on the brink of collapse. At the Battle of Ashdown, Alfred led a decisive charge, delivering a rare victory against the Viking forces. But this wasn't the end. Soon after, Ethelred died, and Alfred, at just 21, ascended to the throne. Alfred's early reign was defined by a relentless struggle. The Vikings, knowing they were close to victory, launched wave after wave of attacks against Wessex. Alfred fought bravely, but the constant battles drained his resources, and soon his forces were stretched thin. In 878, disaster struck. The Vikings launched a surprise attack during the winter, catching Alfred completely off guard. The Viking army, led by Guthrum, overwhelmed the defenses. Alfred's kingdom was on the verge of collapse, forcing the young king into hiding. He retreated to the marshes of Athelney and the remote swamps of Somerset, where he gathered a small band of loyal followers. With his kingdom overrun and his people in despair, Alfred began to strike back with hit-and-run tactics. He organized a guerrilla war against the Viking invaders, using the marshes as a base to launch surprise attacks. He rallied support from local lords and rebuilt his strength in the shadows. Alfred's resilience inspired hope in his people, and slowly he rebuilt his army. After months of preparation, Alfred knew it was time for a decisive strike. In May 878, Alfred faced the Viking army at Edington. This battle would decide the future of England. For days, the two sides clashed in brutal combat, with neither willing to yield. Against the odds, Alfred's forces broke through the Viking lines, forcing Guthrum to retreat. The victory at Edington was the salvation of Anglo-Saxon England. After the battle, Alfred did something unexpected. Instead of seeking complete destruction of the Vikings, he opted for diplomacy. He negotiated the Treaty of Wedmore, where the Viking leader Guthrum agreed to convert to Christianity. As part of the treaty, the Vikings withdrew from Wessex and settled in the north and east of England, an area that would become known as the Danelaw. The Treaty of Wedmore divided the island. The Vikings controlled the Danelaw in the north and east, while Alfred retained his kingdom of Wessex. This peace allowed Alfred to focus on the future, rebuilding his kingdom and fortifying it against future threats. Though peace had been secured, Alfred knew it was temporary. The Viking threat still loomed large, so he embarked on a series of reforms that would transform Wessex into a stronghold. One of Alfred's greatest legacies was his network of fortified towns, known as burhs. These burhs were designed to act as both defensive strongholds and economic centers. Strategically located throughout Wessex, these fortified towns offered protection for the people and a place to store supplies. This system created a level of security that had never been seen in Anglo-Saxon England, making future Viking raids far more difficult to succeed. But Alfred didn't stop with the burhs. He knew that Wessex needed to control the seas to prevent future Viking invasions, so he laid the foundations for what would become England's first navy. Alfred personally oversaw the design of larger, faster ships to patrol the southern coast and intercept Viking raiders before they could land. Alfred was not only a warrior king, he was also a man of learning, one of the few kings in early medieval Europe who could read and write. He believed that knowledge and wisdom were the keys to a strong kingdom. He also established schools, promoting literacy among the young. His efforts led to a cultural revival in Wessex, setting the stage for what some historians call the Alfredian Renaissance. Alfred's long-term vision went beyond just defending Wessex. He dreamed of a united England, free from the Viking threat. Though he did not live to see it, his policies laid the foundation for the eventual unification of the Anglo-Saxon kingdoms. His grandson, Aethelstan, would continue Alfred's work, expanding Wessex's influence and eventually bringing the Viking-controlled Danelaw under their rule. Alfred's dream of a united England would become a reality under his descendants. Alfred the Great passed away in 899 and became the only English king to be honored with the title the Great, a recognition of his unmatched contributions to the kingdom. Alfred remains one of the most famous and revered kings in English history, remembered not only for his military brilliance, but for his wisdom, vision, and enduring influence on the nation.